On their first album, AC/DC sang, "It's a long way to the top if you want to rock and roll." Well, after 7 years of creating a powerful collection of wall-shaking rock anthems, this Australian quintet has accomplished what they set out to do. They have climbed to the top of the rock mountain. The classic Back in Black sold an incredible 8 million copies, and their latest, For Those About to Rock, is selling even faster than its illustrious predecessor. Guitarists Angus and Malcolm Young, vocalist Brian Johnson, bassist Cliff Williams, and drummer Phil Rudd have shocked the world with the success of their heavy metal mania. "We view rock and roll as a common denominator," lead vocalist Brian Johnson said. "We're just out there on stage trying to have a good time and hoping that everybody who's listening is enjoying it too. Everybody should be able to get into what we play because our music really comes from the heart." Despite all of their current success, it has been a long way to the top for AC/DC. Their story begins in the Highlands of Glasgow, Scotland, the birthplace of Angus and Malcolm Young, the youngest in a family of 6 children. An economic recession gripped Britain during the early 1960s, and the Youngs relocated to Australia. In their preteen years, Angus and Malcolm began playing rock and roll, often with musicians twice their age. They had met another Scottish expatriate, the late Bon Scott, forming a band that Malcolm described as being able to make music that the kids could relate to. The band was AC/DC. Australia in the mid-1970s was a country more comfortable with performers like Helen Reddy and Olivia Newton-John than with purebred rockers, and AC/DC took the nation's pub circuit by storm. The band played a mixture of revitalized Chuck Berry tunes as well as original numbers, quickly becoming the most outrageous act ever seen down under. Their show featured the striking contrast of a bare-chested tattooed Bon Scott performing alongside baby-faced Angus, who dressed in the tattered schoolboy uniform that remains his trademark to this day. "We've played the pits, where beer bottles come whistling by your head all night long," Bon Scott said during AC/DC's first American tour. "Those were the people who liked you. The people who weren't in the mood to hear you would do something a little more drastic, like come up to the stage and punch you in the nuts." Their unique image and stage dynamism attracted the attention of a small Australian record label, who signed AC/DC to their first contract and directed the group into the recording studio to capture their live energy on vinyl. Aided by the production team of Harry Vanda and George Young, older brother of Angus and Malcolm, AC/DC was prepared to take on the rest of the rock and roll world. "Australia is not a big market," Malcolm Young explained. "People there weren't comfortable with rock and roll. They'd listen to Helen Reddy, but most major bands rarely toured there. When you reach a certain point and you want to make a living out of playing music, you've just got to get out of there." So AC/DC moved to England in 1976 and signed a worldwide recording contract with Atlantic Records, who promptly released a 1-album compilation of their 2 Australian LPs under the title High Voltage. They set out on a whirlwind British tour that, according to one overwhelmed journalist, threatened to tear the roof off of every venue they played. Their live triumphs were mirrored by the growing popularity of High Voltage. "We enjoy ourselves, but if we didn't take it seriously, why the hell should anyone else?" Malcolm Young said. That initial effort was disdained by most of the rock press, which viewed the band's calm, metallic approach as simplistic and one-dimensional. The fans, however, jumped on AC/DC's musical bandwagon. Here was a band to give rock and roll a much-needed kick in the ass. The group soon established a pattern of spending 10 months a year on the road, taking time off only to return to Australia to record their next albums, Let There Be Rock and Powerage. While their studio albums were drawing more and more attention within the music community, AC/DC Live made the rock world sit up and take notice. Their albums moved steadily up the charts in 1977, and they launched a world tour that introduced them to America, opening for virtually every hard rock band around and crisscrossing the country like Amtrak. They built a loyal, vocal following. AC/DC then attempted to capture some of their stage excitement with a live album, the dynamic If You Want Blood, You've Got It. While the record couldn't hope to capture the sight of Angus drenched in sweat, laying down blistering power chords amid discarded bits of his schoolboy uniform, the strength of such numbers as Problem Child and Whole Lotta Rosie overwhelmed heavy metal starved fans everywhere, launching AC/DC into a huge international concert attraction. "We've always enjoyed playing live more than anything else," Malcolm Young said. "When you see the people reacting to what you're doing and feel that energy, that's what rock and roll's all about." Despite their escalating success, AC/DC changed strategies for their Highway to Hell album. They broke away from the Vanda Young production team and went to London with producer Robert John Mutt Lang. Lang's work on songs like Girls Got Rhythm and Touch Too Much helped refine the band's sound. The album became an instant radio favorite throughout America, and as the band continued their hectic touring schedule, Highway to Hell became AC/DC's first platinum seller. After spending 5 non-stop years in hotel rooms and recording studios, AC/DC had finally attained international stardom, but just as they were beginning to enjoy their newfound success, tragedy struck. On a cold winter's night in London, Bon Scott, whose macho stance and legendary carousing had always been at the heart of the band's appeal, was found dead, apparently after one of his notorious drinking binges. Suddenly it seemed that just as victory was in their grasp, it was about to slip away. After a difficult period of introspection and soul-searching, AC/DC realized, as Malcolm explained, "We couldn't give up." They soon found vocalist Brian Johnson, who had enjoyed a degree of notoriety with the Scottish hard rock band Geordie in the early 70s, and moved back into the studio with Mutt Lang to record Back in Black. The rest, as they say, is history. Back in Black was a rock and roll phenomenon. Without the benefit of a major radio hit, it soared to the top of the charts and stayed there. To the astonishment of everyone, the band included, it became the biggest selling heavy metal album in history, doubling the highest single album sales figures of rock titans like Led Zeppelin, Deep Purple, and Van Halen. In less than 6 months, AC/DC had moved from the brink of disbanding to become the most popular group in rock and roll. "Of course I was a little worried about joining the band," Johnson said. "Replacing someone like Bon Scott is a difficult task. Thankfully, everything worked out remarkably well. The whole experience of being a member of this band has been unbelievable." Now, with the release of For Those About to Rock, AC/DC has shown that stardom hasn't softened their metal instincts, as they blaze away with songs like Put the Finger on You, Let's Get It Up, and the incredible title Cut. "We just do what we do best," Brian Johnson said, "and that's play rock and roll."